Thanks very much, Mark, for the introduction, and thanks, John, and the Texel team for the invite to present today. So I'm going to talk to you about valuing transformational technologies in sheep breeding. But I'll start with a picture of a hippopotamus. So you might wonder what a hippopotamus has got to do with sheep breeding, but the technology race that we're in is kind of like being chased by a hippopotamus, which is kind of a bad thing. But the good thing is you don't actually have to be faster than the hippopotamus. You just have to be faster than this guy that's running from the hippopotamus. So bear that in mind as I talk to you about technology and how it can be used for sheep breeding. First, a little bit of backdrop. So we've seen a lot from the last session on trends in food production and trends in food consumption. So we're in this rapidly changing environment of production and also consumer expectations. So on one hand, we have things coming to market like lab-grown meat and plant-based proteins. On the other hand, we have things coming to market, we have things like environmental expectations and animal welfare. And all of these are led by kind of consumer expectations. On the other hand, we have an increase in the need for production efficiency, and there's an environmental element to that. We also have new products coming to market like Tamana lamb. So this rapidly changing food production and consumption environment represents both challenges and opportunities. And I want to draw on some of the tools we have to identify what the opportunities are for the Texel breed, for example. So we've got this rapidly changing food production and consumption environment. We've got a change in the way that agriculture is viewed as well. So we have money pouring into agriculture and agri-technology. So this graph shows you over the last 5 years or so how much money and how many deals have been done putting money into ag tech. So there's a lot more interest in technology going into food production for all the reasons I talked about before in terms of the market situation. So ag biotechnology is part of that. There's a slice of that pie that represents investment in things directly that we're involved in this room. So genetic improvement, genomic technology, and things like that. This is an example of a genetic trend. It's not a genetic trend. This is an example of a price of Genus, which is a listed genetics company, and you can see it's gone through the roof, representing an interest in the value of technology associated with genetics. We've also got new breeding program techniques. So we've got things like genomic selection, which is more or less embedded in industries like dairy. It's taking off in beef industries, and it's certainly in play in sheep, and pig and poultry are well used to using genomic technology. We have gene editing. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with the recent EU ruling which describe gene editing as genetic modification and has the potential to limit our use of it for food production. At the moment, the technology is focused primarily on solving problems related to animal health, welfare, or removing practices that have welfare issues for an animal. So how do we go about getting a handle on what technology is worth? How do we nail down the technology that represents the most value to farmers and what the consumer wants to see in their food production process? So we can do things like do a value proposition. We can put some economic numbers around the technology. So a couple of years ago, Abacus did a study for the British Texel Society to actually quantify the contribution of genetic gain to the UK sheep industry. And so we looked back from, I think it was 2014 we did it, we looked backwards for 10 years and we came up with a number around £200 million of value added to the UK sheep industry through Texel's endeavours in genetic improvement. We also projected forward until 2035, and we established that genetic improvement in the Texel breed was likely to contribute about £250 million to the UK sheep industry. That was using the technology that Texel were already doing at that time. If we think about what Texel are doing now, genomic selection, new traits, you can add a bit to those future numbers, probably in the order of 20 or 30% worth of increase in value. We can also put economic values around gene editing type technology. So we did a study for the Irish Cattle Breeding Federation to demonstrate what the value of gene editing for polled would be. So we worked out what the cost of it was on farm, around about €7 per calf, and we tracked what it meant to map that across the whole Irish sheep and beef and dairy industry. We also asked farmers, and actually farmers were willing to give up about €12 in economic index value of their animals to not have to do dehorning, right? So the absolute economic value was €7, but there was perceived extra value for not having to do dehorning. So capturing the value of that technology and selling that to government, to policymakers, is a way of demonstrating that we can actually do things with technology that matter economically to farmers and otherwise, because €12 is more than 7. In the last session, there was a lot of discussion about understanding your market, what do consumers want. So we have to be cognizant of what consumers want when we implement technology or new traits. And there's tools to do that. So this is an example. I apologise. It's a survey focused on dairy cattle, but the concept is the same, where we can use some methods to understand what farmers want in terms of trait improvements. We can do things like run surveys alongside taste panels to understand, do people care about texture? Do they care about tenderness? And SRUC has tools available to do exactly this. And so building in market expectations for products into breeding programs is really important. There's a lot of new traits coming to market. So a prime example would be something like feed intake or meat quality, as Natalie talked about this morning. We need to think about really sensible ways of putting values on new traits. So instead of worrying about complicated equations and complicated bioeconomic models, we need to be very clear and simple about how we value trait improvement. So if you think about feed intake, for example, we can easily and transparently show that if an animal eats less, then there's a direct economic value associated with that, and communicating that to farmers is a way of helping them understand that genetic improvement for feed intake means real money in their pocket. I feel like I'm repeating some of the things from the last sets of presentations here, but social licence to farm is something that's come up this morning. And we can't emphasise enough the fact that when we consider our improvement programs, we have to think about our social licence to farm. It's kind of apparent in the Brexit bill and the expectations of farmers from society that we will do things right by the environment and by animal welfare and whatnot. So things like food safety, animal health, and environmental externalities have to be in our technology evaluation programs. And we need to think about putting those things in place at the start, not when we're halfway down the track, because you can't go back and undo your investment in a technology, but you can explore the impact of your technology before you start that investment program. We also have to balance the value of the technology versus the regulation that's put in place to manage it. So I mentioned the example before of gene editing, where it has the opportunity to possibly revolutionise some of our farming systems through better animal welfare, better productivity, animal health and disease management, and yet we've seen policymakers put regulation around that maybe limits our ability to use it. So that balance between innovation and regulation is very important in making sure that our technologies are valued properly. So I see these things: tech value proposition, understanding the market, clearly and sensibly demonstrating the benefit of technology to the users, whoever they are, and managing social licence to farm as the toolkit for the Texel Society, for example, to push on with an evaluation program that adds value to farmers, but also more widely to the supply chain and UK consumers and global consumers. I'll finish up by saying that Texel are ahead of the hippopotamus, and I think they're even ahead of the guy being chased by the hippopotamus. So it's kind of a good place to be, and there's heaps of opportunity. With that, I'll pass back to Mark.